First, before I jump into this episode, I had a quick message to all of you. First, I want to apologize for those of my listeners who have been following every episode that I've released. Thank you for being part of my show. Second of all, I just have to apologize because I have been hesitating like you wouldn't believe trying to get this episode out. And I will tell you, I've been dealing with a little bit of spiritual warfare that I haven't experienced before that I'm aware of. Ever since I have decided to follow Jesus and be the best person I can be, I guess, for lack of any other better word, I've just kind of sailed through the past year and a half. But lately, there's been lots of fiery darts that the evil one has been sending me. And one of them has been basically convinced me that why am I doing this podcast? Why am I doing this episode, especially, which is my testimony? Because I don't want to offend anybody, but this is my story and my journey. So I'm saying that up front because I do talk about being Catholic and why I'm not Catholic anymore. And I don't want to offend anybody that is Catholic because this isn't about religion. This is about where my heart is and where God is. And I just want to state that up front. Fiery darts go away. I'm going to get this episode finally edited and released so that I can continue on with my show with the other interviews that I have scheduled. So without further ado, let me continue on with the episode that I recorded about 4 weeks ago. Hi, and welcome back to Walking with the Chosen. I am your host, Shay Keith. Today's episode is going to be a little different than the past several that I've done. This episode is going to be about my story and how the Chosen has changed my life. I'm hoping that if I share my story, you'll feel more comfortable sharing your story here on Walking with the Chosen. I do have some interviews that are coming up after this episode, so you'll get an idea of how I do interviews and how I talk to people, and I'm really looking forward to sharing those with you. I'm hoping that I can share this episode without rambling and try to be as concise and also just share my heart. And I know that this won't always be easy because there are moments just like when you watch The Chosen and it makes you have tearful eyes, right? Well, that's what happens to me when I share my story as well. I've been sharing it more often thanks to my life groups. I've been in a couple life groups here with my church, and it helps when I share it because it gets a little easier each time. So I'm hoping that when I share this time on this recording, if I get carried away with emotions, I know I can always pause my video and then pick right back up once I recompose myself. But at the same time, I want to be authentic and transparent with you so you understand where I'm coming from and how much this show means to me and why I even started this podcast. So let me dive right in and just start sharing a little bit. I think I've mentioned many times before that I was born and raised Catholic. My parents are very strict Catholics. They go to church every Sunday. They don't miss any holy day of obligation, and they even attend some holy days that aren't obligated. And even though I was raised in the church and I had my baptism there, I had my first communion, I was confirmed, I even had my marriage done in the church. It wasn't an actual marriage ceremony, but it was, we got married with the justice of the peace. And then once we were able to go to the church and get everything done there as well, and kind of blessed by the priest. So I was trying to do all the right things according to the Catholic Church. But I did not have a relationship with God. I did pray to God. I did believe in God. And I think God was trying to reach out to me many times in my lifetime, but I just kept him at a distance. And I think that is the thing I've noticed is the most different between myself and other evangelicals or born-again Christians is that if you are born again, you have a relationship with Jesus. And if you were raised in some of these other churches, and I can't speak for everybody because everybody's story is different. So maybe if you were brought up with religion like I was, maybe you were Lutheran or Baptist or Methodist or Presbyterian or Catholic, you were any of those other religions and that's what you were raised with. I feel like we are taught to follow those laws and rules of those churches. Like I said, all the different things you have to do, the holy days of obligation, you have to be at church every Sunday, all the rules. But I don't know that everybody learns to have that relationship. And when I say that, I think about looking at Jesus up on the cross. When I would go into church and I would see him up on the cross, and he was a person who died for my sins. I heard that all the time, but it never really registered in my heart what that meant. And yes, as a Catholic, you do the Father, Son, Holy Spirit when you do the sign of the cross. You say all those words. But some conversations I've had with people in my life just very recently made me realize that maybe their emphasis is on God the Father and not God the Son. And that was what my story was. And I was so focused on God. And when I prayed to God. I didn't put Jesus in that story. And like I said, maybe this is just me, and maybe it's just the few people that I talk to where I seem to get that same feeling from them. And I can't speak for everybody. I know there are some people who are Catholic and they have a great foundation and love for God. So I don't know how this plays out, but it seems like people that have a relationship with Jesus are typically the born agains. And I guess you could be born again Catholic. I don't know. I remember when I was a kid, I had a friend at school. She was saved. And I remember asking my mom, what did that mean to be saved? Because I wanted to be saved. And mom's like, well, we have confirmation. And I'm like, well, what does confirmation mean? I'd already been confirmed. By the time I was in high school, I'd been through confirmation. And I can't really even tell you what it means. I was baptized because my parents believed that as an infant, I was born with original sin and I had to be baptized. I had First Communion because that's part of the church. My parents wanted to make sure I had my First Communion. I was confirmed because I was of age and I was supposed to get confirmed, but it was never a choice. These things were done to me, not things that I was like, I can't wait for this. Now, don't get me wrong. As a child, I did weird things. I played like communion. My mom gave me this little book that took you all through the Eucharist and all the things with the church. And I remember playing, and I had my little candy wafers, and that would be my communion. And my friends, we were all Catholic, and we play this silly stuff together, right? We pretend we're at church taking communion, the stuff that kids dream up. And I know that, like I said, religion was important to me, I guess, at some point in time, but I just never felt close to God. And like I said, I prayed at night. I've asked friends of mine, do you have a relationship with Jesus? And they said, well, I pray to God all the time. But I think there's a difference. And I'm saying all this, there's a reason why I'm leading up to all of this. So just hear me out. I hope I'm not offending anybody with this, because I'm not trying to offend you if you or somebody that belongs to any religion, because I'm not. I'm a non-denominational and I follow the Bible now. So that's where I've been led. And I'm so thankful that I'm there. But part of that was because of The Chosen. It led me in that direction because I wasn't getting fed from the church. Because where I was raised, you didn't read the Bible. The priest told you what you needed to know. And I really missed out on a lot for not reading the Bible and not having the forethought to even try to understand what it meant. My pastor said something once a couple months ago that sounded so good and made so much sense to me. He's like, when Jesus wants you to understand the Bible, when God wants you to understand the Bible, he removes the veil from your eyes, from your mind, and all of a sudden the Bible starts making sense. And I think that's what happened, because in the past, I did try to pick up the Bible once or twice, and it was just kind of like, just put it aside. It just didn't resonate with me, it wasn't clear to me. And now when I read it, it's like, I understand what he's saying. And not only that, I understand, here's what happened in the Old Testament, and here's how it relates to Jesus coming in the New Testament. And even it's so cool how all that stuff just works together. Another time where I know that God was probably reaching out to me when I was 16 years old. And there was a guy, it was my first job at a donut and ice cream shop. And there was a guy who was a few years older than me. I think he was 20 maybe. And he would come in there and get ice cream, and he would talk to me from time to time, asking me if I knew Jesus. And I'm like, well, I'm Catholic. That was always the standard, right? Yeah, I know who Jesus is. I'm Catholic. But he was trying to explain to me about the Bible. And I remember one time in particular, and we're talking, this has been a long time ago, over 30 years ago, almost 40 years ago. And he had said to me, he said, well, if you think about the Bible, if you ever have any doubts about it, you have to remember that there would be a lot of smart people that would have had to come together to create this book, to make it so people would believe it. And we know that's not how the Bible came about. The Bible was started way back with the Jewish traditions when it was the Torah, and it evolved into what we have today as the Bible because of a lot of people recounting their stories as what happened when they were around Jesus or the stories they heard of Jesus after his death, such as in Luke's case when he was writing the gospel, and even Paul, because he wrote what, 1/3 of the New, or I can't remember the number. It's like 1/3 of the New Testament. I think is what Paul wrote. A lot of the New Testament was written by him, and he wasn't a follower of Jesus either. So he learned from the other disciples, and he had God speak to him on the road to Damascus. So he told me, he said, just think of how many smart people would have had to collaborate on this to make up the Bible, you know? And I remember telling my mom about this guy sharing this stuff with me, and she was just like, oh, you need to stay away from this guy. I don't know why, but she did not feel comfortable with me talking to apparently an evangelical, I'm assuming is what he was. I don't even remember what religion or faith or whatever he had. He was Christian, I know that much. And I probably should have got to know him a lot better because maybe he would have set me straight. And he was really cute too. So for me, I like I said, I was raised Catholic. And I went to church part of my life because I had to. And then as an adult, I stopped going because I was an adult and I didn't have to anymore. Nobody was forcing me to go. And occasionally I would go. I was the Christmas and Easter kind of Catholic. And then there was a period of time where I was trying to go on purpose. I was dating many years ago, back in the 1990s. And every time I would date somebody, I would go into church and as I was sitting there listening to the priest do his sermon, I can't tell you how my mind would just wander and it would start thinking about maybe the person I was dating at the time. And all of a sudden I would get these thoughts in my mind about this person. I'm like, oh, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about, oh my God, I don't want to be with this person. And so I'd leave church thinking I can't go out with this person anymore. It's almost like God was speaking to me at church, like, showing me everything that was wrong with this person. I mean, legitimately, I shouldn't have stayed with these people. And then when I met my husband, I refused to go to church because I didn't want to hear anything bad. I'm like, I want this guy to be the one. And we got divorced 3 years later. Well, 5 years later, I guess, after we got married, technically. But we separated 3 years later. And that should have been a sign right there that, you know, God has my back and I refuse to listen. Fast forward a few more years and dating, I started going to church again. And I remember one time I was in church with this one guy and it's like all of a sudden everything came crystal clear. All the lies he'd been telling me, like everything just crystal clear. And I remember talking to him right after church and we were talking about some things and basically he was telling me he was Catholic and he was all these things. And it's like, he didn't know anything about the Catholic Church. He didn't know how anything worked. And then all the other lies, the stuff that he told me, I discovered he was a chronic liar. So that was a big red flag. And I'm like, okay, don't go out with that person anymore. Again, God was speaking to me in church. And when I did finally meet my second husband, I wasn't going to church at that time. And when we decided to go ahead and get married, we found a justice of the peace. And I had to wait till my first marriage was annulled. And then once that was, then he became Catholic. And then we had our church officiated in the wedding just to make it Catholic. And then I was going to church then, and I went to a retreat. And that was the first time I think I literally felt Jesus touch me. The retreat was amazing. It was very harsh in some ways on me, and not the retreat itself wasn't harsh, but for me and how it kind of wrecked me for 24 hours before I got restored to a new light. I think Jesus was trying to show me he was real. And I swear I felt him touch my shoulder. When I can't remember if it was a priest or if it was the deacon or whoever it was that was following them around. We were kneeling in prayer and I had my head down and he touched my shoulder. And instead of it being just that person touching my shoulder, my mind saw Jesus' hand with a white robe hanging down over his wrist, touching my shoulder. I couldn't even tell that story for many years without crying because it was just so emotional. It just moved me so much. And after that retreat was over, I went from somebody who didn't have any relationship with God to wanting to know all these people that were attending. I wanted to know every detail about their stories. I wanted to go be in nature and just be with God. I saw the sunset as I was driving off to a vacation that following week, and it just like the colors of that sunset were amazing. I felt so alive from inside. And that worked for a while. But my husband, even though he was Catholic and he went to church with me, I could tell he didn't like going to the Catholic church. He went because it was important to me. And if you've ever been married to somebody that didn't really like going to church, but they did it for you anyway, it feels almost like you're kind of just dragging them along. And we got to the point where our summer times we were spending at a lake with friends, and I didn't keep pushing for us to go. And of course, he wasn't going to make a big deal about it. And then we just kind of stopped going. This was a few years later. And time went by and we just never went back to church. And I just lost touch, lost interest. We got to the point where our marriage split apart in 2020, like so many marriages did in that time frame. And when I moved out, I remember looking at all these extra Bibles. I had like a Catholic Bible. I had one that had my name on there, which I still have, but the other Bible was old, worn out from when I had it since high school days when I was in the Catholic school. And it's funny because that book was only worn out because it had been moved so many times. It wasn't worn out because I did anything with it. The cover was paperback and it was getting worn out. Anyway, I had a lot of different Catholic books and tapes. I threw all that out because I'm like, why? I don't follow this stuff anymore. So I just chucked all of it, kept one or two Bibles, and then just moved on with my life and lived independently for a short time. And a few months later, after I moved out, my ex sent me a text message saying that he wanted a divorce. He realized that he didn't love me, and he'd already moved on with somebody else. And I was devastated. Even though I moved out because I was unhappy with some things that had gone on in our marriage, I was thrilled to be alone for a short period of time. But as soon as I got that message, it wrecked me. And that was the beginning of the start with Jesus, I suppose, because that was a turning point. I was wrecked. I was crying. I was blown away. I was angry. You go through all those emotions and those stages. And I didn't really know what to do. And every time I saw him, like we agreed just to settle this as easily as possible. We just got online, went to a divorce website and just entered all of our information in there and parted ways quietly. And even when we were going through the divorce, we would talk to each other just like we always did. We just had these conversations that went on for several hours, talking in the kitchen about what was going on in the world, because this was the start of 2021, and just everything that was, you guys know what was going on in 2020 and 2021. I don't want to get political or get into too much drama, but just our society, our life, our world has changed so much. And I think that was part of it. I think God was pulling me back like, hello, I'm over here. And the day that I finally had to go back over to his house and move everything out that was mine that was the hardest weekend. That happened in May of 2021. And I remember just, oh man, it was so hard. The tears, the heartbreak, everything. It was really rough. And I'm like, I never want to go through that again. And our divorce was going to be finalized in June of that summer, on the day after Father's Day, actually. And I decided, okay, he's seen somebody. I guess maybe I'll try seeing somebody. Maybe that'll make this easier. And I got on a dating site. Actually, I was on Facebook on a Christian site, and I found somebody that didn't live in my state, but I really liked how he seemed to know God, and I thought, I need to do something different. I kept pushing God away back when I was in the Catholic Church. I need to try doing something different this time. So I took a chance on a Christian guy, and it was good because he did expose me to the Bible and get me to think about praying at our meals and praying, just at all times. Pray for me. Even though I was in one place, he's another, he was letting me know he was going to pray for me. And I just thought, that's kind of weird. Why would somebody be praying for me? These are things I was not accustomed to, other than maybe my mom being worried about me and praying for me, because I know that she prays a lot. But somebody that I've just met and just started dating, that was a very foreign concept to me, that somebody would want to pray for me like that. And The divorce hit, and that, fine, I get through that. July 4th weekend, I go down to the lake where I hang out with my friends, and of course they're my ex-husband's friends as well, and he shows up with his girlfriend who I've never seen before. And that was the first time that really slammed me hard, because we were all in a bunch of boats waiting for the fireworks display to start. And I turn around and I see him with her, and I just, knocked me out. And I go jump in the lake, and I'm trying to hide my tears because it's getting dark outside. We're getting ready for the fireworks. And I'm just like, okay, my face is wet. Nobody's going to see me crying. And I went back after the fireworks were over, and my friends all pulled their boats in, and I just sat in the boat. I was not ready to be with everybody else. And my friend was asking me, he goes, "Hey, you doing all right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And he goes, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "Nothing. Just," he knew what was wrong. He's not stupid. He knows what's going on. And I have to get back to my camper, which is on the top of this hill. And eventually I crawl myself up there, but I've been texting my sister-in-law, like, I don't know what to do. And I forgot to mention that my sister-in-law and my brother have been trying to get me to watch The Chosen at this point in time for the last couple months. And they've been trying to get me and my ex-husband to talk to each other, which we just flat out refused to do. We wouldn't talk to each other. And partly that was my fault, because when I moved out, I was just so done. I just wanted to be alone. Well, he made sure I stayed alone, by moving on and getting divorced. And I guess that he was talking to them and I was talking to them, and they're like, "Your only problem is you guys aren't talking to each other. If you would talk to each other, you could sort all this out." And we probably could have. Looking back now, I could see that. But at the time, divorce is a messy thing. So my sister-in-law was encouraging me to go into my camper and just talk to Jesus. I'm like, "I don't know how to do that." She's like, "Just talk to him. Like, he's in there with you," because he is. I'm like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to talk to Jesus. I've heard lots of people, like Bible thumpers or evangelicals, or born-again Christians. Yeah, you guys can all talk to him. I don't know how to do that. And she goes, "Just go into your camper and start having a conversation with Jesus." Well, what else are you going to do? You're crying, you're upset. You don't want to just like leave defeated and go back to your home, especially after you had a thing of alcohol to drink or whatever. And I go in my camper and I'm like, "Jesus, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm crying. I'm upset. I'm talking to you." And I don't remember what all I said. It wasn't a lot. But eventually I ended up leaving the camper and going to mingle with my friends for a little bit. And finally I just went to bed because I was getting up early the next day to head to Iowa. And that was probably the start of my conversations. And I know they kept wanting me to watch The Chosen. And I knew eventually I wanted to watch it. But at the time when they first suggested it, it was before we hit Splitsville. And I had already known about The Chosen. I've heard Dallas talk about it on podcasts. As a podcaster myself, I listen to lots of podcasts, and I'd heard him talk about the show. I'm like, "Oh, that sounds really cool. I need to watch that someday." But I wasn't ready because I was afraid if I watched it, that maybe God would speak to me and convince me to stay in my marriage. How crazy is that? It's like I knew what was going to happen if I would watch it, and yet I refused to watch it anyway. I was, like I said, keeping God at a distance. That's something I had learned very well for many years. And I started dating this guy, and we all went to the Lake of the Ozarks with my family, something that I've been doing for years with my brother and sister-in-law. And we rent a place to stay, and we all have our rooms to stay in and whatnot. And the day we were supposed to leave, they're saying, "You need to watch The Chosen." And I'm like, "Yeah, I do. I want to see it." Well, the guy I was seeing wasn't too thrilled about it because he said you have to be careful about what you watch. They can change the scriptures around so fast and it'll warp it, and then you'll get the wrong impression and whatever. And I'm glad I trusted my brother and sister-in-law and said, "Okay, let's watch this show." Because we watched the first episode. Actually, we watched the very first episode with the shepherd first. And he wanted to show me that just to have a little introduction. I'm like, "Okay, well, that's cute." So then they put on season 1, episode 1 with Mary. And I remember tearing up at the end. I was just like, wow, that really hit me. And it hit me pretty hard. And then right afterwards I said, "Well, can we watch the next episode?" So then we watched the season 1, episode 2. And I think that they were probably happy that I encouraged, like, I want to do this some more before I left. We were supposed to already leave to be driving home, and I wanted to stay there longer just so I could keep watching the show. And on the way home to my house, the guy I was seeing, we were talking about it, and he was actually quite pleased with it. He pointed out some things because he had a lot better history knowledge than I did about Pharisees and Jews and customs and everything. And in fact, his name was Sam, and he told me the name Shmuel actually is Hebrew for Sam. And this was confirmed just this past week when I had a Messianic Jew come to our church, and his name was Shmuel. And I thought that was pretty cool because I'm like, oh, yeah. And I think he was the one that said that Shmuel also means Sam. So anyway, I just thought that was kind of funny because I didn't know much of the history. So that's what I was trying to tap into as I've been sharing season 1 recap with you, is as I have learned history either from the Bible or from my pastor or from other people, I'm trying to incorporate my knowledge in there to hopefully educate you, because maybe you also don't know all those details like I didn't know. And after that week had gone by, I couldn't help but keep watching more episodes. And we were trying to watch them together. Like, he was at his home 2 states away, and I was at my home, and we would talk about the episode. But it got to the point where I didn't want to wait. No, I just wanted to keep watching. Like, stop slowing me down. And I flew to Nashville for my podcast conference, and I downloaded a few episodes, and I watched it on the plane. And then I flew up to Minnesota where he lived, and we watched a couple more episodes. And each time I watched an episode, almost every single episode, I was full of tears. It just hit me so hard. And eventually I saw the first 2 seasons, completed all of those, and he and I split up sometime around there. And I just couldn't stop watching the shows. I kept going back and watching different ones that I would remember. Like, I want to go back and watch that one again. I want to watch that one again. And I found a church that I started attending. And then I bought some Bibles. I wasn't sure which one to buy. I bought an NIV version. I bought a King James version. I bought, my sister-in-law recommended an ESV version. I had, I think maybe the NASB version at that time. I'm not sure. I have one now. I can't remember when I got one. But I didn't know which one. And of course, I'm getting older, so I wanted the bigger print. I ordered the first one. The print was so small, I couldn't even read it. And I really don't want to use reading glasses. So I have all these Bibles now, and now I found a church, and it was a Calvary church. And if you've seen Jesus Revolution, then you know the story of Chuck Smith and how he started Calvary. But I didn't know any of that at that time. I just went to a church that I felt like I lived in Kansas, but I lived near St. Joe, Missouri. So I kind of looked at all the churches that are in St. Joe, Missouri. And there was one church that I had gone to for the Dave Ramsey program back when my ex-husband and I were dating. We went through Dave Ramsey together. And of course, there's a lot of biblical references pointed out in that. And I didn't quite get all of that stuff, but I took the man's word for it when he talked about, you know, how you shouldn't serve 2 masters, for instance, money and God. And maybe that was God's way of trying to reach out to me by doing Dave Ramsey. But I thought, well, maybe I'll go to that church. And it took me a while to even remember, like, where was that located at? It was a bigger church, and I felt comfortable there. And I was going to go there, but for some reason, this other one, it was called Grace Calvary Chapel. And I'm like, that sounds, I don't know, there's something about that. So I went there one day, and the pastor was fairly new. He was from California. His name is Josh. And as soon as he started preaching up there, I mean, the first was the music. For me, being a Catholic, that music was like, what? I had tried a couple of times to attend other churches, an Assembly of God church, another non-denominational church, a couple times non-denominational. One non-denominational, back when between my 2 marriages, I actually liked quite a bit. And I remember that pastor was talking about David and Goliath, which I didn't know anything about that story. And boy, that guy explained things so well. I really liked that. And I was trying to be hopeful back when he and I were together because I knew he didn't like the Catholic Church, and I was trying to be open-minded to try other churches, and I just couldn't do it. So for some reason, though, watching The Chosen and getting to know Jesus as a person and then realizing he's also God, I really wanted to get to know Jesus better somehow. And I didn't feel like the Catholic Church was teaching me about Jesus. It was whatever the priest wanted to talk about, but it just didn't seem like he was going to explain all the scriptures to me. Again, that's my experience, and maybe you have a totally different experience, but that's been my experience with the Catholic Church. So I go into this church, and the music, I sat there, and of course I'm feeling uncomfortable because I don't know. I like, if I hear music, I like to sing along with it if I know how the music goes, but I don't know any of these songs. I don't listen to Christian radio. I never really attended these churches, and they've got the words up on the screen, but so what? I don't know how to sing that. They're just words. Where's the music? Where's the musical notes? And I tried, and I remember that some of the songs, like, I was feeling emotional. Like, I was starting to tear up even at church. And of course, I blame a lot of this on the divorce and the whole emotional roller coaster. Oh, and by the way, I was hitting menopause all at the same time. So I figured it's probably just the emotional garbage of all that hitting me, the hormones and, the divorce. And that's why I'm tearing up. But there were several people I noticed that would, going to church every week, you would see people tearing up or wiping their eyes. Even sometimes the worship team up there was one gal that I remember her just crying out and just on her knees, and she couldn't sing. The rest of the group kept singing, and she was just in tears. And I found out later it's because she was, I think she'd had a miscarriage, and she was really wanting to have a child, and she was so heartbroken, and she's trying to sing, and she's praying and worshiping. It was beautiful what she was going through, and being so vulnerable in front of us, and something you would never see in a Catholic church. And then, like I said, the pastor comes out, even that very first time, and wow, it just blew me away because we read whatever we were studying. I don't remember which book we were in at that time. And we were going through that together. And then after we were done reading it, then he goes into explaining everything. And it was just like, wow. Not only was he explaining what all this meant, but how it applies to my life today. And it was just like, I got to come back here. There's something about this church. So then I started going back every week. And I remember one time I was leaving the campground with all my friends, and I was getting up early, which I am not an early person, but to get to church on time, I had to get up early and do all this stuff. And I remember my friend saying, "Where are you going so early in the morning?" I'm like, "I'm heading to church." And he's like, "You don't strike me as a church person." I'm like, "Well, sometimes things change." So I went off to church. And again, I wasn't bringing a Bible with me because I don't know how to do all this stuff. I wasn't sure how long this was going to last, but I kept going. And I think I started going around August. So it was after I started watching The Chosen. I'd probably seen the first season. Maybe I've seen both seasons. And I started going to church. I felt called to go there. And then I buy the Bibles. And then one day when I'm at church, this was after the guy that I was dating, we had broken up a few weeks earlier. And I'm in church that day, and the pastor, after he was done with the sermon, he kept going on and on about, if you feel like God's moving you today to accept Jesus into your life and surrender to him and let him, take care of you and blah, blah, blah. I don't remember what he was saying, but it went on for quite a while, like several minutes. It wasn't just a one and done. Like, if you feel called, make sure you stand up and we'll pray for you. It wasn't like that. It's like he was really persistent. And we're all got our heads down, bowed, and I'm listening to him go on and on about this. And he's like, I think he felt like somebody needed to be, asking for God that day. And I wasn't the only one. There was more than one of us that must have stood up. But all of a sudden, what went through my mind was Nicodemus. Nicodemus, season 1, episode 8, where he was standing there and Jesus saw that they have a bag of money sitting there, and Nicodemus is around the corner. And Peter's like, "Well, here's this bag of money." And Jesus says, "A friend of mine left that." And then Jesus says, "You were so close." And Nicodemus is crying his eyes out. That scene flashed through my eyes as I was sitting there with my head down. Because at the time I was thinking, well, I was raised a Catholic. I know who Jesus is. I don't need to surrender to Jesus. I've already accepted him in my life because I'm a Catholic. I've been confirmed. Like, these are all the things that I'm rationalizing through my head. And all of a sudden, that scene, it literally kicked me out of my chair. I jumped up like I was sitting on a hot seat. And I was crying, and I was like, I'm accepting Jesus right now. And people came up behind me and they put their hands on me and they were praying for me. And I remember I just kept crying. And Josh was up there on the stage, Pastor Josh, and he was telling people, make sure you're praying over these people. If you see somebody standing, make sure you pray for them. And it was the most moving moment of my life. I finally publicly accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior. It seems so funny to even say that out loud. But that's when Jesus really started moving in my life. About that time, my brother and sister-in-law have been trying to convince me to move to Kentucky. I just got a new job. To their encouragement, go find another job where you can live anywhere and then you can come move to Kentucky. Well, I put my name out there, found a new job. I was able to work from anywhere. And I was going to move to Kentucky to live near them, start my life over. I had no reason to stay in Kansas anymore. And I felt like I'd lost connections with my friends over that summer. Obviously my ex-husband was still very rooted in with my friends, and I just felt like it was best for me to move on. The funny thing was, my ex had told me when I was moving out, he said, well, you'll probably end up at Lake of the Ozarks someday. And I'm like, what makes you say that? And he said, well, you've always loved it. You've always wanted to live there. And I'm like, yeah, it was funny. It was the furthest thing from my mind. And my brother was looking for property at the lake in October because they wanted to buy something and then rent it out. And at that time, they're convinced me to go to Kentucky, and I had got my cats ready to go on this long trip. I was going to stay with my brother for a couple of weeks while I searched for properties in Kentucky and try to plan out where I was going to take my horses and all these things. And I woke up this next week, and I'd already decided I want to go look at some properties at Lake of the Ozarks just out of curiosity. Could I afford anything down there? And I knew that the values had gone up so much in the last couple of years after COVID that I figured I probably couldn't afford anything. And I had already arranged to meet with a real estate agent. And then that morning that I woke up that I was supposed to go to Kentucky, I had everything packed and ready to go. I had the cats loaded up in their cat carriers, and I'm ready to go. And I just went, I was tossing and turning all night the night before. I just did not feel right about this trip. Something was just telling me, do not go to Kentucky. You don't need to move to Kentucky. You need to go look at the lake. And I don't know why I felt so strongly about it. Obviously, it was God talking to me, but I couldn't sleep the night before. And I don't usually have those issues. I usually sleep just fine through the night. And so that next day, I texted my brother and sister-in-law, and I said, I'm not going to Kentucky. I'm going to go to the lake. I'm going to look for property there. But maybe I'll go to Kentucky later. And I was journaling at that time because I was trying to, everybody said you should journal when you're reading the Bible. So maybe you'll see God speak to you that way. And I was talking like, God, I don't know which way you want me to go. I don't know if I should do this or I should do that. And I was looking for clarity. And I guess that was my moment of clarity, was when I couldn't sleep that night. And I drove to the lake, and then I called my parents on the way to the lake, and I said, hey, do you want to go look at these places with me? And my mom's like, oh, I thought you never asked. So they came down and looked at some places with me, and they went home, and then later I met them at their house, and they're like, so did you pick out a place to live? And I said, I don't know. And that night, I went to bed, and I tossed and turned all over again. And this one place, the place that I'm living in today, would not leave my mind. It was like, it just kept flashing. It kept me awake again, tossing and turning. So the next day I woke up and they're like, so what'd you decide? And I'm like, I think I need to make an offer on that place. I think that one is really calling to me. And it's funny because it's the one that required the most work. It's a nice condo, but it needed new carpeting. It had wallpaper on all the walls. It was decked out from the 1980s, older furniture, which if you buy a lake place, they always leave furniture behind. And then which can sometimes be great. One condo I looked at had all brand new furniture. This one didn't. So it needed a lot of work, but the price was a lot lower, and it had a really nice view and had everything I wanted, had a dock, had a swimming pool, had everything there. And it felt like home when I showed up here. I loved all the trees and the atmosphere. It was a small complex, only a couple of buildings, and it just felt like home. And I made an offer, and my brother said, well, if it's meant to be, if God wants you to live there, everything will go smoothly. And sure enough, everything went smoothly up until that last week when I was supposed to close, because thanks to the condo collapse down in Florida that year, that had really started to play on all the loans, trying to get a loan. And it wasn't supposed to go into effect until January 2022, but Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they were just really causing a lot of issues. And luckily, finally got everything worked out and was able to close the deal, and I was able to move to the lake. So it was funny how I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And then The Chosen becomes such a big part of my life, and I couldn't stop watching it. And then to be at church and see Nicodemus flash through my brain, and I did not want to be left behind. That was the whole point. I forgot to mention. It's hard when you get emotional to remember everything you want to say. I didn't want to be left behind. And that's what I felt like. I felt like if I didn't accept Jesus, I didn't want him to tell me you were so close. And it was resonating with me that moment in time. So I had to stand up, and I guess that would be when I was quote unquote saved. I don't know that I was saved, because I believe I was a Christian my entire life. I knew who Jesus was. I believed in the Holy Spirit. I believed in the power of prayer. God has answered prayers for me in my past. So I knew all of that existed, but I just didn't know how to talk to Jesus. And once I learned how to talk to Jesus, that's when my life changed. And that was because of The Chosen. So I'm not one of these people that has an amazing story of near death or, I don't know. I mean, at least I had some belief. I wasn't an atheist to begin with. But I will say there was a lot of times that I questioned if I should stay a Christian. I have a friend that's a Sikh Indian, and I started researching Sikhism. I found it very interesting, and I was really looking into that for a while. And I have a lot of Indian friends that are Hindu, and I thought that was fascinating, but I never did understand the idea of many gods and trying to keep track of all their gods. It felt more like a Greek thing when the Greeks had all their many gods. Buddhism was something I thought of many years ago. And then I also respected Native Americans and how they believed in, was it Father Earth, Mother Earth, Father Sky, I think. It's been a while since I've thought about that. But there were many times that I felt like I wanted to go down these other spiritual roads. And I even considered myself spiritual for a period of time, even though I still believed in God. I never let go of God. He was always there to me, God the Father. And The Chosen has brought Jesus to life. And not only Jesus, but all the disciples. You know, it's fun watching their characters evolve on the show. And I know that some of those things are biblical. Some things they don't know. So they've created these stories. I mean, there's not much about Peter's wife in the Bible, Simon's wife. And yet we have Eden and all her story, what she's going through and how it relates to us today. And, you hear a lot more about Zebedee than you read in the Bible. And James and John, the sons of thunder, they are a pair that I definitely relate to. And we get into season 2, I'll have to share that too, because as I was going through my first journey of experiencing Jesus and reading the Bible, and that was one of the things that Sam, the guy I was dating for a while, he said he could see I was changing. He could tell that God was working in my life. But I was also very passionate, and I'm still a passionate person, but I think I've controlled it a little bit more thanks to God. Because I know that I can get fired up, and I'm a redhead. I have a fiery nature. I'm Irish. But God is helping me to calm all that down now so that I can just be more loving and respectful and caring of others. So The Chosen has just been such an important part of my story, and I hope that they continue to get all the way through season 7, and I really, really hope that they come out with something regarding the Acts of the Apostles and keep those guys, the same guys that are playing the characters today, the disciples. I think it's just going to help drive the whole New Testament home for a lot of us if we can see that play all the way out. But who knows what Dallas has in mind for the future, and if those actors want to continue playing those parts forever. But what they're doing right now with The Chosen, how they write the episodes, how the actors perform, it's just amazing. I saw something today that I thought was pretty cool. It was a writer from CNN. So it was exciting to me to see that a liberal network was talking about The Chosen in a positive way, because they were saying it was like Game of Thrones meets Left Behind. And I thought that was an appropriate way of putting it. And they're saying this isn't like your typical Christian story. The quality is so much better. And I didn't read the whole article. I just basically read just the top part of it. But it was good, because that's the kind of exposure that The Chosen needs. They've been showing up on Fox News. I see them a lot on even the commercials now. The Chosen season 3 is done. And yet I saw it recently on Fox News one night. So I'm just really excited to see where the show's going to go. And I feel like it could be part of the start of maybe a revival coming to this country. We've already seen what's happened in Ashbury and other colleges around the United States. I'm praying that there's going to be a revival here in 2023 with Jesus Revolution coming out. I don't know. There's a lot of good stories coming out. If you have seen Jesus Revolution or His Only Son, which is a beautiful story about Abraham and Isaac. It's a different kind of Christian story. It's not going to be like The Chosen with all the comedy in it, but it's a very beautiful story. And I don't know. It's like all these great, wonderful Christian stories are coming out with high quality. It's like we're craving these kind of stories, this quality of movies, and it just helps spread it to other people. And I know when I talk to people that have never seen The Chosen and they hear me talk about it, they get excited about it because I'm excited about it. And that's one reason why I started this podcast is I felt God wanted me to create this podcast. I'm still questioning why. But The Chosen is such an impactful story. If it can change people like me and change my heart and some of these other people that you're going to hear about and how it's changed their hearts, I think that's important. It's leading people to God. It's leading people to Jesus. And Jesus says, nobody can come to the Father except through me. And that's why I feel like it's important to pick up your Bible and start understanding it. If you are somebody that has never really read the Bible before, or you only read it once, I hear that a lot from family members. Well, I read it once. It's like, no, this is God trying to talk to you. And I'm learning that. That's why now I own many Bibles. I have different study Bibles. And this is why I attend a Bible study group. And it's why I belong to life groups. And it's why I go to church every Sunday. I no longer have to go to church because the Catholic Church is telling me to go. I go to church because I love going. This past weekend was Easter. And I met with several of my life group members. And we were talking about how we wouldn't have this connection with each other. We would just see another strange face going past us, going in and out of church. But because we've had life group, we've had a chance to get to know each other. And now we have fellowship and we get together and we go out to eat just during the year sometime. We've celebrated birthdays that way. We've gone and seen movies together. I'm always the one to say, hey, let's go see The Chosen. Like everybody to go to it. In my life group, I refer to everything as, oh yeah, and Chosen season 2 episode, blah, blah, blah. That's how I know The Chosen. I know where everything happens and I know how to relate to everything that way. And I'm learning how to get that way with the Bible as I slowly work my way through that really big book. And if you belong to any other, if you have a religion that you follow in Christianity, I'm happy that you have found a way to build your relationship with Jesus and build your relationship with God. I think that is really, really important that we all keep praying and that we all learn what God's will is for us. And that's something that I'm really trying to hear from him right now. That's what I pray for all the time. It's like, I just want to do your will, Lord. And I think that's how, even though I was a Christian all my life, and even though I think that I've always believed in God, now what's changed being born again is that I want to follow him. I want to know what I'm supposed to do, how I'm supposed to live my life. How am I expected to be a good Christian? How am I supposed to help in the Great Commission, which is something I learned because of a song. I didn't even realize there was such a thing until I heard Kane singing that song about the Great Commission. Oh my gosh, I love that song. And that's something else I started doing after The Chosen. I started listening to Christian music. My sister-in-law encouraged me to start listening to it. And now that's all I listen to. And last year I caught myself apologizing to one of my friends when they got in the car when I said, oh, sorry, I like to listen to Christian music. And thank God. He was like, oh, no, it's okay. Whatever you want to listen to is fine. Made me feel good because we listen to a lot of 80s music down here at the lake, going from like we want to go dancing, we'll go out to the bars and things. I don't drink like I used to. I used to party all the time. I used to love to get drunk every Saturday at the lake, drink, feel good, go to the camper, pass out. I didn't care. And it was only kind of a lake thing. I didn't do it the rest of the year, but I don't have that desire anymore. So I'm trying to figure out who I am in the world. And I know that once you really start following the Christian lifestyle, you aren't part of this earth anymore. And that might sound funny if you haven't reached that yet, but it's true. It's like once you start following Jesus and you want to be like those chosen guys that you see, we're all broken down here. We all have our flaws and our issues. But what's most important is that we love each other and we accept each other and we help each other grow. It's not our job to judge each other. Wherever people are in their walk of life, whether they are struggling with their identity as who they are as a person, we just need to love each other and let God do the work. And I think that's one of the most important things I picked up from my church, because that's something in our society today that they are trying to divide us so much. And like I said, I don't want to get political on you, but I do think that the society tries to separate all of us. And I think it's more important that we just learn to love each other and we look past their lies that they're trying to shove on us, whatever the media is, and just learn to trust God. And I encourage you to find a church that you like. Even if you've been burned by church before, find a church that means something to you and that talks from the Bible, because the Bible is where God's going to speak to you. And don't expect it to happen overnight. At least it didn't for me. I met one gal at church that said that she was an atheist, and I don't know what her story was in life. She, trying to remember if she watched The Chosen or not. I think she did. I think she was going through it. I can't remember now, but she just felt God told her to read the Bible, and she ended up reading the entire Bible in a month, and she got saved, and now she's at church every week, and she loves God. It's awesome. I love seeing that. And when I see people get baptized, we had several spontaneous baptisms that took place at our last baptism at our church. They had a couple extra that people just jumped in with their jeans and got baptized. But by the end of that Sunday, after everybody gone home and some of the pastors were still at church, there were more people that came back to get baptized. They did a total of 15 baptisms that day, which was amazing and so wonderful. And when I see people getting in and getting baptized, getting totally submersed, it moves me. And I got baptized on August 31st of 2022. And I was totally submersed, and it was my choice now. And I decided to follow Jesus and get baptized. And they did my whole video, my testimony, and it was probably a better version of the testimony in about a 5-minute video than everything I've been trying to ramble on about today. But it was a really good video. And I'll have to share that on YouTube just to show other people, because it's important that we're all vulnerable with each other and that we can all experience God's love. And I still don't know why God wanted me to create this podcast for sure, other than I'm hoping that it leads more people to watch The Chosen, maybe with an open heart, open mind. Even if you watched it once, maybe you'll go back and watch it again. And I have found there are times if I haven't been watching it for a while, like last summer, it got to the point where I'm like, I need some Jesus time. And I wasn't reading the Bible all the time. I would use YouVersion on my phone or the Abide app on my phone, but I wasn't really reading the Bible, and we didn't have life group going on in the summertime. And I just felt like I needed some Jesus. So I would go plug in The Chosen. I'd start watching it. I'd start over at season 1, or else I jumped in the middle of season 2. It didn't matter. I just wanted to see the actor Jonathan Rumi playing Jesus and how everybody, and I wanted to cry at the end, and I still cry every episode. And I've actually asked God, I said, I don't want to lose the connection I have. So if I cry at every episode until the day I die, I'm totally fine with that. I would rather be that sappy, sentimental, sensitive person watching that show, crying my eyes out, than somebody who doesn't feel anything. Because I just feel like God was speaking to me through that show. And I hope that he moves you in a similar way if he hasn't already. So I apologize for going so long tonight. I didn't expect to go this long. I wanted God to use me to share the story with you, and I hope I got my point across. It's hard to share, and I hope that it will encourage you to possibly be on the show and share your story with my listeners and my viewers here. These interviews that I do, I'm going to try to record on video, because I think it's important that we can see each other, and I can direct a conversation better when I can see somebody on video. But I hope you'll feel comfortable sharing your story with people and letting them know how Jesus has moved you. And I know your stories will probably blow mine away. Mine was just a broken woman who had just gone through a divorce, and now I've got joy, and I'm so at peace. And I encourage everybody. I actually have a friendship with my ex-husband now. Both of my ex-husbands, as a matter of fact. And I've been very open with them about my Christian beliefs and where I feel. I try to encourage both of them to watch The Chosen. So it's been nice to be able to have those conversations start, because my second husband and I, we should have had conversations. Instead, we just shut each other out. And I pray that maybe they will both watch The Chosen and have it move in their lives and bring them some peace and joy. And you never know what God can do with that. So that's all I wanted to share tonight. Thank you so much for being here. And if you if you would feel so inclined to be on the show, I would really like to hear from you. You could send me an email at Shey, SHEY, at walkingwiththechosen.com, or you can visit my website and leave me a voice message right there on the site, walkingwiththechosen.com. You'll see a thing. It says leave a message. And I really hope to hear from you. So until next time, keep walking with the chosen and keep that conversation going with Jesus and with God. And I pray that God listens and helps you see his will and that you're able to fulfill what he desires, because his plans are great. We just need to listen and trust and love him. Until next time, I'll see you later.